everybody. Ilah here, certified hypnotherapist. Ready for a wonderful, fun-filled episode, Subconsciously Speaking. What's in your mind? And today we're going to talk about fears and phobias. What are they? How do they work? How do they form? How can we move back from them? But first, as I stated before, I like to do a little segment prior to really starting. So, as I was preparing for today's talk, the other day, about fears and phobias, and just doing some research as I've done, I'm sipping tea and I'm feeling pretty wise, when a real life fear came to test. It's a crawling fear in my shower, 8 legs. It was confident, it does not pay rent, and I stood there. Was getting ready to step in and became frozen in my towel, debating whether to handle it like a mature adult or burn the entire house down and just start over. But I chose the third option. I closed the door, wished it well, and said, "You win this round, Jerry." But it did get me to think how fast fear could kick in, even when logic is standing right there thinking, really? It's the size of a pinhead. And one time I remember I took out one of Jerry's cousins for my son, who was about 5 at the time. And I bent over to kill this 8-legged creature, and my back went out just like that. Trigger? Yes. Every time now I bend over for arachnoid, or just any time I bend over, there's a little bit of a, is my back going to go out again? And that was 28 years ago, 30 years ago, something. It was a long time. So fear can stick with you. And I've worked through it. I'll still bend over, etc. But let's get into today's segment. Fears and phobias, what are they, how do they form, and how you can overcome them. So I'm glad you're watching today, and I want to talk about something that most of us, if not all of us, have dealt with one day or one time or another, whether you want to admit it or not. And that's fears, and specifically phobias, and how they develop and how they take shape in our lives. And then how can you overcome them? So what is a fear? Let's start with some foundational information and understanding. Fear, it's a natural response to a real threat. Let's say you're in the woods and you hear a rattlesnake nearby. Your body reacts, you freeze. Your heart pounds, your senses sharpen. That fear is adaptive. It's protective. It's designed to keep you alive. That's the fight or flight or fear kind of reaction you have. And it's in the amygdala here in your brain. And if you want more information, see episode 2. Now, phobias are a little bit different. Phobias are irrational fears. The brain reacting as if there's danger even when there isn't. You might know logically that a butterfly can't hurt you, and that an elevator is statistically safe, but something deep inside says, nope, not safe, not going there. And that's where the subconscious mind comes in, because it doesn't really care about logic. It cares about association. Many fears start with an event. Maybe you fell into a pool as a child and now you panic around deep water. I remember when I was probably 12, I jumped into the 8 feet of water, and it was a diving pool, 8 to 12 feet. And my sister, bless her little heart, she was about 8, jumped on top of me and kept pushing me down, and I couldn't stand. Now I can still swim. I don't have a fear of water. Just don't touch me. If I'm in the water, don't touch me. That's where my fear, and that's for my safety. That's what ended up happening with me. So it's a conditioned response now. I love swimming. I was an expert swimmer at one point. I don't have a problem with it. Just don't touch me. I'm definitely not a contact sport person when it comes to being in the pool. But some fears don't begin with any experience at all. Those are what we call phobias. So let's say your mother was terrified of dogs, and every time a dog walked by, you heard her gasp, right? And maybe even pull you behind her to cross the street. You never had a bad experience yourself, but your subconscious mind logged that reaction. Dogs equal danger. So now there's this inherent fear, emotionally, energetically, and subconsciously. This can happen across generations. There's a story about this about generational information. So the little girl asks mom, hey mom, when you make a roast, you cut the end off. Why do you do that? And mom says, well, that's because grandma taught me how to do it. So the little girl asks grandma, why do you cut the end off the roast? And she goes, because that's what Nana taught me. So the little girl goes to Nana. Nana, why do you cut the end of the roast off? Well, so it'll fit in the pan. So we can have generations right there. And that's, I don't know if that's a quasi-true story, but the idea is sound. We learn things as we go on, and we learn them. Phobias and fears, they can be passed down, and not just in short stories or in a behavior, but in emotional patterns. A grandparent who had a trauma during the war might pass along a fear of loud noises, confined spaces, even if they never talked about it. I have a very high tolerance for loud noises. I had worked with somebody who just did not. I don't know where that came from for her. She loved being around children, but they had to be quiet. And me, I didn't care. I taught for 20 years, and my classroom was usually the loudest. We just had fun. So common fears and phobias. Let's name a few, like, just to bring this to life. We have fear of public speaking, fear of flying, fear of spiders, fear of elevators or closed spaces, fear of rejection. There's a big one. Fear of driving, fear of success or failure. Yet that can count too. And then there are emotional phobias, like the fear of abandonment, confrontation, a loss of control. These might not get you sprinting out the room, but they can quietly sabotage relationships and careers in your dreams. So looking at fear of public speaking, flying, spiders, all that, some of these can just be nothing more than a phobia. It's something that didn't have an actual experience to it. So a client comes in and they're an adult and they're afraid of flying, and they've never flown a day in their life. So how do they know that they're afraid? Because mom's terrified of it, even though she's never flown. So now this child has this fear, they have to fly, even though it's like education about flying. And hey, I'm going to do a plug here for a website. It's called Ilah Pilot. And they're a great group of people that are really helping people with their fear of flying. And that's the one fear that I probably have the most challenge with, because in order for you to know you've overcome that fear, you got to get on an airplane. And it can be a little expensive. One of these days, I'll get a flight simulator in here in that virtual reality, hopefully sooner than later. But meanwhile, let's get back to like spiders. If you've had any, I've never had, except for that one time bending over in the bathtub, I've never had any fear of spiders. I've never like walked into them. I've had them on me, and that can be kind of scary, but it's probably more of a phobia for me. My husband is no problem. He's a country boy. He just takes his finger and just kills them with the black widows. It doesn't matter. He just, it's like, it's the underside you got to be, fair of. Rejection. We can go into a whole thing on rejection relationships, which I will at some point in the future. So going back into what can you do on your own? Well, let's talk about how you can begin to loosen and the grip of those fears. Some techniques that can be used starting just today. First of all, name it to tame it. Give your fear a name. Be specific. Instead of saying, I am afraid of XYZ, you can say, I'm afraid I'll be judged when I speak up. The more specific you are, the more power you take back. Write a letter to the fear. Use the therapeutic tool I often use is writing, journaling, just your fear of whatever. And then you just talk to it in that letter and shred it. Just get it out and shred it. It's done. And it starts to make you clearing, and it starts to make you feel better. You might be surprised just what it has to say, and just help it talk back to you. Imagine it sitting in a chair. This is kind of a gestalt kind of idea. You're here and the fear is here. Put a picture on it, whatever it is. And now I want you to imagine it talking to you. Walk behind it, look over its shoulder at you and see what it's saying. Maybe it's just in its own survival. And we'll talk about that at some point in the future too. But it builds awareness and it starts to detach. You start to disassociate yourself from it. And you want to interrupt the patterns. When fear shows up, try doing something unexpected. For example, sing your thoughts out loud in a silly voice, or just, I like Scooby-Doo's voice. Ruh-roh, I wait of spiders. It's in my head, right, you know? But just stand up, spin around, snap your finger, put a rubber band on your hand. Just whatever, just do something silly the minute a fear hits you, and you start to associate every single time. You start to associate that silly with the fear, and then it starts to become silly. And the more you do that silly over and over and over and over and over again, even thinking about the fear starts to get interrupted. And you start to create a new pattern. And it starts to realize this isn't a threat. And I want you to consider another idea of visualizing. Visualizing your fear. Imagine yourself facing your fear with strength. Create a mental movie, how you want to respond, rehearsing it over and over and over again in the mind, especially in a very relaxed state, helping shift how the subconscious mind reacts. Breathe in the movement, in the moment. Oh, here it is. So breathing is a very good tool. We have all different kinds of breathing, breath work, etc. And you need to breathe to live, obviously. But breathing can be boring when you're in a panic. So I recommend a harmonica. It's like you got to breathe in and you got to breathe out. But now it's fun. And it doesn't matter if you can play or not. And if you want to, go to YouTube. A lot of free lessons you can take. And there's 10 holes. They're even numbered on the top. I recommend getting a C harmonica just to start with. And then just, I'm scared. I have a phobia. Just practice blowing into one hole. In and out. Be the choo-choo train. Whatever. But the thing is, you're just making breathing more fun. But when you start to breathe, you loosen those muscles up. Breathe in through the nose, count of 4. Breathe out, count of 8. Double it, just really slow, and concentrate on that. And you start to feel that fear, that phobia just starting to subside. If you move your body, your emotions follow. Remember, emotions are energy in motion. And I use the harmonica. What does hypnosis allow us to do? Here's where hypnotherapy becomes a true game changer for many. Hypnosis allows us to bypass that critical overthinking side of us and goes right directly where the fear lives, the subconscious mind. And in a hypnotic state, you can literally unhook the fear from the event that started it, perhaps, or you can release the inherited emotion or the patterns that go with it that don't belong and don't serve you. You can install new associations, again, episode 2, ones that feel safe and calm and empowered. Someone with a fear of flying might, in hypnosis, reimagine themselves boarding a plane with total calm, being guided to the first moment their mind linked airplane with danger, and simply reframe it. It's because the subconscious mind accepts the imagery and the emotion as real. Remember, it's all reality to the subconscious mind, absolute truth. And it works to create that rapid change. So you're creating a new known, a new emotional pleasure that brings you cognitively, or consciously, your new emotional pleasure, and it doesn't bother you anymore. And sometimes we can work directly with suggestions, just retraining the mind through positive reinforcing and phrases. Positive affirmations you can say to yourself. There's other times we work metaphorically. We can rewrite the story, whatever the subconscious mind's holding on to. Sometimes it's a matter of just locating the emotional hot spot and then resolving it gently. Even if you remember it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Sometimes we just make it up as we go. Just imagine. Imagination's the most powerful tool you have. We can use it. We need to install a resource. So it might be installing confidence and courage, or a sense of safety that you have. Whatever the case, you're always working with whatever the subconscious mind already knows how to do. Change and grow. And it does. We know how to do that. We just are afraid to, because it means changing. It's okay to change. So you are not your fear. Okay? It's important to know fear is not your identity. It's a reaction. And reactions can be retrained. Your brain is not a fixed machine. It's not plastic. It learns, it adapts. And just like it's you've learned how to be afraid, it can unlearn it. It can learn to feel the sense of peace and safety. It can learn to feel that confidence again. Fear is just a message. When we listen to it, really listen to it, we can usually hear it say something like, I want to protect you. Your mind is just doing what it's meant to do, is protect. It just doesn't always know how. Hypnotherapy helps give that part of you a better tool, a healthier way to protect you without holding you back. I want to share a quick story about me. In 1982, I was in a very bad car accident, and it was like at midnight, and the driver was taking a hairpin turn, a 15-mile-an-hour hairpin turn at 80 miles an hour. We were in the absolute middle of absolute nowhere. So think about nowhere and go to the absolute nowhere part. But the truck caught on fire, and there were passersby. So God was with me, I'm sure, that night. But in the end, I ended up breaking my neck. It didn't sever. I can still walk and move. I do have stiffness, whatever. But here's the thing. I had to learn to drive on the freeways in California. California is famous for its freeways. And if you live here, you just learn to know to drive the freeways. And I do deal with a lot of people afraid of driving on the freeways. Okay, so that's where we can work on where that came from. But for me, I couldn't drive in the number 1 lane, that first all the way to the left. That just scared me for a long time. My mind was protecting me from the idea that I might crash. But after a while, I was determined to get past this. I live in California. I am going to overcome this. So I got it to where now I could drive with those cement barriers that, next to the number 1 lane, the yellow line that's painted. If there's a yellow line, no problem. But now I had to get better. I had to be able to drive and pretend there's a yellow line there. Now, this took me a while, but once my mind understood that I became mature enough to learn, emotional maturity started to be created, it started to allow me to remember the accident because I didn't have any memory of it. And that was fine. It just lets me remember just enough. Okay, I understand now what happened, what was going on and how I got this big old bruise. It's from that steering wheel. It was a very old, one of those big old trucks, the 2 tones or whatever. But I overcame it. Now I get on the freeway. I don't care. I'll slip and slide and, look for the little cherry on top cars. I can weave in and out of traffic. Doesn't bother me. I can drive anywhere, almost anything, and I have no problem with it. So, but it took me a while. My subconscious mind allowed me to remember, and it didn't re-traumatize me. And now, I'm careful about who I let drive me. I have to trust you, and it took me a while to trust people in the driver's seat. And now I do. I have blind trust unless there isn't any. Then I'll say something. But so far, it's been pretty good. I've done all right. So I've overcome this fear, and I just did it. I did it consciously, subconsciously, whatever it was. So anyway, that's just kind of a tidbit of fears and phobias. And I just want to give you a closing thought. If fear has been living rent-free in your mind or in your body, it's okay to ask it to leave. It doesn't serve you. It can go. Not with aggression, but with confidence. You can thank it and then begin the process of reprogramming it into something far more useful. Thanking it because it felt like it was just protecting you. Even if you ever want help, I guess this is where I can come in, working with your fears and phobias, just through private work, one-on-one. You can even attend a guided hypnotic session with me, knowing that door is open here for you to come in. I don't just work with the fear, I work with the you that lives beneath it, the part of you that's always been brave, even when afraid. It's not failure, it's just feedback. Everything is feedback. You're learning something, you're gaining resources so that you can overcome what it is that's causing it. Feel the fear, wave at it, hello, and just keep walking. preferably not into a spider web, of course. And just thank you so much for being here today and listening. And if you have any questions, again, just feel free to reach out. Until next week, when we will be going over procrastination. Woohoo! But I only want to go over real quick before I hit. I am offering in person in Visalia free in-person weekly self-improvement classes. This is going up on my website. This is just the first 6 classes, but it's weekly self-improvement classes. They're going to be free. Rewire your mind 1 week at a time with me. It'll be Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. to 8:45 p.m. and it starts June 25th. Space is limited, so you need to register. You'll register at freeselfimprovementclasses.eventbrite.com. You can read all about it there or on my website, or just call me. There's some events already been created on social media, and I'll just keep plugging it away. But occasionally there'll be live demonstrations done during these sessions. Maybe I'll call up volunteers. I won't voluntold you, but anyway. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and I just really want to just teach people that hypnotherapy, hypnosis is safe, it's organic. And it's fun. It can be just the journey you can go put yourself on. Again, there'll be occasion when I do guided meditations right here during those classes. So first up will be change work, shifting the mind to transformation. I did a little segment on it in episode 3. I'm going to do a 2.5-hour class on it on June 25th. Come in and enjoy the fun if you're in Visalia. It is in person. It will not be recorded. It is not going on Zoom. At least not now. I'm not technologically challenged, and I'd have to have a staff. And I don't want to pay for one. I'm cheap. Anyway, take care, everybody. Peace out. We'll see you next week.